Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators, where KRWG invites lawmakers to speak in depth about their work in Santa Fe during New Mexico's legislative session. I'm your host, Jonny Coker, and joining me today to talk about the ongoing legislative session up in Santa Fe is the representative for New Mexico's 32nd District, Jenifer Jones. Representative Jones, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jonny. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So you took office, last year. You've been in office a year. You went through the 60-day session last year, and now you're in the middle of this 30-day legislative session up in Santa Fe. So I just wanted to ask, how has the experience been as a legislator, and how does it feel to be representing the people of New Mexico's 32nd District?
Well, it's a very humbling and humbling experience, and it's quite a privilege for me. And so being in the 30-day session is quite a bit different than the 60-day. We're very busy, very fast, and so we're doing a lot of things in a short period of time.
Yeah, it is a fast and furious session. So my first question is, what are your legislative goals for this session?
Well, my legislative goals, of course, are just to mainly represent my district, which is a rural district. And because of my background, I've really focused in on healthcare, which is healthcare in New Mexico is in crisis in many ways. And so I've just found several ways to help with the various issues that we're having in healthcare, lack of workforce, lack of mental health, behavioral health, those sorts of things I'm focusing on. How
do you feel like New Mexico can become a more attractive place for healthcare providers, especially in rural districts like your own?
Well, one of the things I've done is I've brought back a bill that the governor chose to veto last session, which was passed with bipartisan support, and it is a rural tax credit for healthcare workers. And we fixed that bill too, so that the definition of rural can't be changed by the Department of Health, and it stays stable, and also that nurses that are nurses and people who work 12-hour shifts will be eligible for the full-time credit. So I don't know how much that really would attract people but it might keep people in rural areas. It's pretty significant tax credit.
And you're a registered nurse yourself, and so how would this credit, let's say it was enacted during your career when you were coming up and things like that, how would it help nurses and the people that it's aiming to help?
Well, it would mean thousands of dollars that they would be eligible to keep rather than have to pay to the government. So it is just one of the pieces that we've been working on that would help. It would help, a few $1,000s extra in your pocket a year is meaningful these days.
Representative Jones, you recently unveiled a pregnancy resource guide. I want you to go more in depth about that. What exactly is it, and what does it aim to do?
Well, as the Republican caucus put together a comprehensive website. It's a website with resources for women who find themselves pregnant and need information. It also includes a hotline, so it just gives access to women who feel like they may have needs that they can't meet themselves, or they just basically need information or even support in making a decision about what to do at a time in their lives that might be difficult and making very important decisions. We believe as a caucus that I have many people across the political spectrum who believe that women should have choices and they should be informed. And I, especially as a registered nurse, I've always believed in making sure that my patients have all the information they need to make good choices. We have found that when women are well informed, that they will often know that they're supported and know that they can continue on in pregnancy and that they will choose life.
And I understand, this is coming from the March of Dimes Perinatal Data Center. A third of New Mexico counties are described as maternal care deserts. with nearly 20% of women having no birthing hospital within 30 minutes. And I was wondering if, this is something that you struggle with in such a rural district, and I mean, a lot of New Mexico does, and rural states in general. How can we fix that to where expecting mothers don't have to travel so far for this type of health care?
Well, we need to make New Mexico a place where doctors can practice. I mean, we have a hostile environment for our physicians, and with healthcare in a crisis, our workforce is diminishing in every area: nurses, physicians, physicians assistants, even nurse practitioners, but and all the way down to nursing assistants. We have a multitude of problems right now, but in terms of physicians and obstetric care, that is a big one, and it has a lot to do with malpractice insurance and that sort of thing, GRT. We have to look at really changing the environment here in New Mexico. If you think about it, almost anywhere you are, if you're near a border and you're practicing medicine, and you see that just a few miles down the road, you could actually make a living that is meaningful. You could do the same job, help people, and not have the restrictions and the overbearing requirements of New Mexico and the hostile environment. Like I said, you can move down the road and make a decent living and enjoy your practice and work with patients. So we just need to make New Mexico a better place to work in terms of healthcare.
And I want to go back to the pregnancy resource guide. I understand you want to, the website lays out a lot of resources that expecting mothers can go to, including food assistance, childcare assistance, things like that. Right. And something I wanted to ask about actually was House Bill 6, which was in the House Health and Human Services Committee, and it passed along party lines. And as you know, it would guarantee 12 weeks of paid maternity leave for New Mexicans, and I understand you voted against that. So I just wanted to hear your stance on that. Where do you stand with that bill, and why did you vote against it?
Yes, what a difficult bill that is, because as I said during committee, I have such compassion for people who need leave, and I feel like paid leave is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But the problem with that bill is that our businesses are suffering, and to impose a mandatory tax, which is what it is, on businesses, to create a huge new department costing multi-millions of dollars to New Mexico taxpayers is simply not sustainable. It's not something that we can actually put forth. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And I know it sounds like a perfect world scenario, but we have to have our goals in which we operate. And I said today, when we heard another similar bill, that I would love to create an environment in New Mexico where business thrives and where businesses value their employees. And I know many businesses in my district, they have long-term employees. They're good to their employees. They would love to be able to provide them with paid leave, and they would do so if their profit margin was one that would sustain that or support that. So we need to focus on business being able to support their employees. We can't take this backdoor route that will end up in disaster for our business people. I know businesses in my district that will absolutely close their doors if we impose HB 6 on them.
Okay, and so, correct me if I'm wrong. You're essentially saying it should be on the private sector jobs, essentially, to be able to provide people with paid paternity leave.
With paid leave.
Paid leave, right?
Yes, paid is really the key. Yes, because right now we do have leave. I mean, I made it known I did take leave. I didn't always take all my leave. I had 7 children, so I know this subject very well. I also took leave to care for my husband who had cancer as he was suffering at the end of his life, and I was an oncology nurse. I know the struggles that people go through when they need to have paid leave and they need to have an employer. keep their job when they come back. All of these are issues that I'm very familiar with, and I'm very compassionate about. I just know that we can't break the bank in New Mexico. We can't cause our small businesses to suffer anymore and close their doors. I absolutely know businesses in my community that will close their doors. It would be disastrous for rural New Mexico to pass HB6.
And so I guess my next question is then, at what point would you be in favor of essentially a state mandated paid leave law? Is there any world in which you imagine that would be something you're in support of?
I don't, that's a good question, Johnny. I'm not sure. That's a big hypothetical because there's so many moving parts in that question. I'm really against mandatory, tax increases, and for both individuals and businesses in general. I think, like I said, the perfect world would be that our businesses would value their employees, and I know some that already do. I actually heard from a business person in Santa Fe, not a rural area. This is in Santa Fe too, who reached out to me. He's not in alignment with my party's values. We are from very different parties, but he explained to me that in his business that he's run for many years in Santa Fe, he would have to close his doors if HB6 actually went into effect, and if even one of his employees took advantage of that, in part because of the expense to his business, but also because whenever we have skilled individuals and we're replacing those skilled people, it can be impossible, basically. The loss of business, the loss of just being able to function is one thing. And then in addition to that, if you could find someone else, you'd be paying someone else while you're still keeping benefits for the person who's getting paid leave. And I think another thing, another aspect to that I did voice this morning is that we throw around these tens and hundreds of millions of dollars that we put into creating new departments, and we think that money comes from where? I'm still, as a new legislator, I'm astounded that we don't realize the government makes zero money, that all the money that we have comes from taxpayers. And so anyway, that you gave the short version, the short answer. That was the long one.
I understand. So, I kind of wanted to go back, if we can, a little bit to the pregnancy resource guide. I understand you're asking, you do have a bill that is asking for some money to help build and maintain that website. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. I believe that it is a state responsibility. We have a Department of Health that provides services for our citizens of New Mexico, and they already offer some information about pregnancy. I think that out of respect for our citizens and because it's the right thing to do, that our state should offer all the choices and all the supports to women who are pregnant and need resources.
And on the website, I actually saw, a link. Well, it's not a link yet, but it was talking about pregnancy centers, and I know crisis pregnancy centers have had, some bad press in the past, and this is actually from Attorney General Raul Torres. That said crisis pregnancy centers, that they use unethical methods to lure pregnant people who are seeking comprehensive reproductive health care. So I just wanted to ask you, do you have a response to that?
I think as a nurse, I have a response to that, and that is that my patients they deserve to have all the information they need to make their choices, and we don't offer that currently. So I think it's our responsibility to do that. It's not hard to find options that are not maybe discussed at a pregnancy center. They're everywhere. They're on billboards. They're on the DOH website, and therefore, this website that we have created and that I hope the state will support, and I know has bipartisan support and would be welcomed by the citizens. that website should be welcomed as part of reaching out to the citizens of New Mexico. They deserve information.
Well, so we could stay on healthcare, and obviously that is a big part of your life, being a registered nurse. But I do want to switch gears a little bit to firearm legislation, and well, actually, let's go to the Joint Resolution 8, which would make it to where states of emergency declared by the governor would end after 90 days, barring some special circumstances. So, can you just tell me about the press conference you had regarding that and your thoughts on it?
Okay, well, that press conference was it was brought on in part by the governor's move to take away, the right to have firearms in parks and playgrounds. I think was, and initially it was much more than that, the entire area of Albuquerque. But yes, so that was part of what caused that to be initiated. But actually, it's been going on. The reason for this legislation, or this attempt at an amendment to the Constitution, has been happening for quite a while, since COVID, because we believe that what happens in New Mexico shouldn't be decided by one person. And so because of that, I think what our attempt is to try to limit emergency powers, that the governor shouldn't have unlimited emergency powers, and right now that's what she has. I don't believe that this is about necessarily our governor, although it's about any governor. It's about whoever takes office. There's really, when you have a government that should have checks and balances, that one person shouldn't be able to just create law. And that's wrong. It's against the Constitution, and it should never happen. One person shouldn't be in charge. It's a dictatorship, and we want to avoid that, regardless of who's governor.
And the governor, in her State of the State address, essentially, she called for firearm legislation to cut down on, because she cited that New Mexican children now die at a higher rate from guns than anything else. And I was just wondering, well, specifically, House Bill 137 would prohibit some semi-automatic firearms, large capacity magazines, as well as other attachments that would help increase the fire rate. What are your thoughts on that bill?
Oh my!
I know it's a lot to discuss, but I just wanted to get your overview of essentially, the governor's calls for these types of ban on firearms.
Yes. Well, I believe that the Second Amendment is part of the Constitution, and so I don't think that we should take firearms away from law-abiding citizens. I think it's wrong to use those tragic incidents as a reason to take firearms from citizens, to limit our ability to protect ourselves. If you looked into the research behind what was stated there, I would wonder if any of these laws that are that they're attempting to pass would actually prevent those tragic deaths of children. I don't even know that that's necessarily true. I do know, however, that criminals are not going to they're not going to abide by any of these laws that are trying to be passed right now in our legislature. They don't care. In fact, I think they're emboldened by the thought of law-abiding citizens not being able to protect themselves.
Do you see a world in which you would be in support of any firearm legislation? There's, House Bill 129 would enact a 14-day waiting period. Is that something that you think, is it just all gun bills across the board should be, shot down, pardon the pun, or
yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, that's a big hypothetical as well. I'm in favor of upholding the Constitution. I took an oath to do so, and we have the right to bear arms. Law-abiding citizens have the right to keep their firearms. So, limitations on that, I really don't see that as something that's going to decrease crime. I think firearm education, and accepting that as as a part of our everyday life, as it should be, the ability to hunt and involve ourselves in shooting sports, and to protect ourselves from criminals who really shouldn't have firearms. Being tough on crime might help the situation. We should try that. Um, I do have an interesting perspective that I doubt is really shared by anyone else. I know it's not shared by anyone else in my Republican caucus. I have the majority of the international border, and I think about taking away the guns from my law-abiding citizens right on the border when they're dealing with cartels who actually control every square foot of the border, just in sight of those constituents' homes. Those people will be extremely vulnerable. And I can't see taking away their firearms. And many of these bills, all of these bills, would infringe upon their right to protect themselves against potentially very dangerous situations and against criminals.
I guess to switch gears to talking about the border, I know you are a sponsor of House Memorial 24, which essentially calls on the federal government to allocate resources to our region to help, communities like Deming and other communities like near the border, in terms of, what's the word? In terms of, dealing with the humanitarian crisis at the border, essentially. It's not a bill, but it's a memorial. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, I did sign on to that. I am in support of that. I think this situation needs to be highlighted because I believe as a representative of a border, this huge area of the border, that I have a responsibility to highlight that there's dangerous trafficking in our region. We are part of the El Paso sector of Border Patrol, and what happens in our sector is that a lot of it, we have a very remote area. El Paso is the busiest section of the border, is the busiest port. So a lot of our agents are relocated to El Paso, and it's a shame to say that even some who work in offices in our border communities sit behind a desk to process people who are coming across the border as asylum seekers or whatever their needs are, with the huge numbers of folks who come across and try to get into our country. They are preoccupied with doing that and focusing on that, so that our border is even less protected across the very remote areas. And so with Texas and Arizona and even California addressing the border crisis, the border crime crisis, I might add, because immigration is only a piece of that. I have really worked to focus on the crime that's involved in the border, the trafficking, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking, the drugs that are killing our children, the fentanyl crisis that we're struggling with, in terms of healthcare, even trafficking guns now, because you limit the guns that law-abiding citizens can have, and you create a black market for that. So we have to control our border. We must control our border. I did speak with the governor last session about this, and she agreed with me on all of these things. But when I wrote a letter to her before the lifting of Title 42, she did not respond. We were begging for resources at that time. Our Border Patrol needs resources, and I've used to the point where we're going to have to fix it ourselves. If the governor won't pay attention to it, if no one else in New Mexico will do this and help the Border Patrol with what needs to happen to keep our citizens safe, then I decided to use my own junior money funds to get what we believe is the force multiplier that Border Patrol has told me, and even the state police, our county sheriffs have told me is the force multiplier that they need inside the border. We've given up on prioritizing seizure at the border. That is a Biden administration directive. Give up on seizure at the border. So what we've done, and what I did with my junior funds, is I have contributed that to buy license plate readers, which will help all of those law enforcement entities watch traffic between Interstate 10 and the international border, and help them catch criminals.
And Representative, we only have time for maybe one more question. And that memorial does call on the federal government essentially to do more at the border, like you're saying. And I was wondering, if you saw or if you've had contact with any federal lawmakers, including Gabe Vasquez, who's introduced a package of immigration bills, including the Smart Border Protection Act, that would authorize more funds for the Department of Homeland Security for more personnel at the border. Is that something you've looked at, spoken with lawmakers about, and would it be something you were in support of?
I'm in support of anything that will keep our citizens safe. I just haven't seen any action on that part, and no one's reached out to me. You would think that as a representative and the one who's closest to the people and who keeps in touch with Border Patrol and the citizens that live on the border, that maybe some of our congressional people would have reached out to me, and no, I have not heard a word from them.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Jenifer Jones is the representative for New Mexico's 32nd District. Representative Jones, thanks for joining us today on the program, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Johnny.
Of course. That's all for today's show. Be sure and join us next week as we continue our coverage of New Mexico's legislative session. Additionally, you can keep updated on the latest news on our website at krwg.org. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Jonny Coker. We'll see you next time on Your Legislators.